Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we will be holding a Remembrance Day assembly. So what I'd like to start off by doing is asking you to pause the video for a moment and discuss with the class what does the poppy represent and what do the different colors mean. So if you could pause the video now, and when you're ready to continue the assembly, unpause the video. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you had a lot of great discussion about the various different poppy colors we see up on the board. So we have the white poppy, the red poppy, the purple poppy, and the black poppy. So you may see people in the streets wearing another poppy other than the red one, and these each have different meanings. So the classic red poppy is a general memorial to World War I and to all of the conflicts since that World War. If you see anyone wearing a purple poppy, that is for the animals of World War I and the following wars. The white poppy is a poppy to kind of focus particularly on peace, the ending of the war and the peace terms coming to end that war. And then we have the black poppy, which is specifically to reference the Black community, the African Caribbean communities that contributed to all of the wars. Oftentimes these contributions were played down due to racism. When we think about why poppies, why is it that the poppy is the flower chosen to represent World War? Around the world, really, we wear them in Canada, they're worn in New Zealand, Australia, throughout the United Kingdom. The images here are a bit of a clue. So we've got a poppy field in Belgium, poppy field in France, and also a poppy field in the Ottoman Empire, which is modern-day Turkey. So the reason the poppy was chosen was because in late 1914, the fields of northern France and Flanders, which is in Belgium, were ripped open due to World War I conflict. And in these overturned, damaged, and destroyed fields, the poppy managed to grow despite that fact. It's a very, very hardy flower and managed to grow in these fields. So as the wars came to an end, all these fields were left covered in poppies. So that's how it became a symbol of the war itself. Now, how did this become the flower of World War I and the following wars? Well, most credit is given to an author, John McCrae, who is a fellow Canadian, and he fought in World War I as a soldier as well as a surgeon. And so during his experiences in World War I, where he ultimately did pass away, he wrote several poems, and one of the most famous known ones is in Flanders Fields. So since this poem's release, the poppy came to really symbolize the World War I and kind of memorialize all of those who passed during the war efforts. And it was selected by the Royal British Legion in 1921 as part of their poppy appeal. So as many of you are aware, the poppies have been sold at our school. They're sold every year all over the UK, as well as in Canada and other nations. And all the money raised goes to the Royal British Legion to help support those who are affected by war. And that means all wars, not just World War I, World War II, but also more modern wars, people who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, people who have amputations, and those who's lost family members and need additional support. So what I would like you to do, ladies and gentlemen, is I'd like you to pause this video and select a classmate or two or three who would like to read in Flanders Fields. And what I would like you to discuss is, what do you think the message of John McCrae's poem is? What is he trying to get across in this poem? So if you could pause the video now and click the video back up when you are ready. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to kind of explain what in Flanders Fields means, and we'll see how close you guys were at analyzing and interpreting his message. So the first stanza, it is: the graves of the dead soldiers are surrounded by poppies. Birds fly ahead, but their calls cannot be heard over the battle gun fire. which leads us to the second stanza, which says, the dead soldiers are the narrators of the poem. They once felt the beauties of lives, but are now dead and buried in Flanders Fields. And the last is about them speaking to us, the living, and asking them to carry on their fight, to not let them down, or they will not rest in peace. So this was really about making sure that our side won the war, that these men did not die in vain, that we would succeed, and hopefully that their deaths wouldn't be meaningless. So in preparation for making this assembly, I wanted to kind of consider and think about, my own connection to the wars. And there are so many different websites nowadays. Ancestry.com is another example, in addition to the ones that I have up there on the board. And I think this is a really good opportunity this time of year to kind of reflect on our own histories and how we are connected to the wars, and maybe our family members or family friends have been impacted by the war, the things that we have today because of the sacrifices of others. So I've put some links up on the board. I do note that many of these do require memberships, and some of those are paid memberships. So if you're interested, just keep an eye out for that. So what I decided to do is I decided to speak to my grandmother, Anne Smith, about her father, my great-grandfather, James McCallum. So he was a sergeant major during World War II, not depicted in the image up on the board. I don't have any images of him, but this is just some Scottish soldiers in North Africa, where my great-grandfather did serve for many years. So what I did is I called her up and I did a little video chat with her and asked her some questions about her grandfather. And I would really, really encourage you guys to ask questions of your elders and see what they know, and listen to all their stories. My grandmother loves to tell a story. So she was thrilled for me to ask her all these questions. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is me. Hello, Granny.
And we have to get through all this again?
Yeah.
Oh,
no. All right, so everyone, this is my granny, Anne Smith. And we're going to discuss her father, my grandpa McCallum, and his experience in World War II. So, Granny, why did Grandpa McCallum decide to fight in World War II?
Well, he didn't have a choice, because with him being already in the army, he was called back for the action, I guess, I mean, he was a sergeant major in the army. He'd been in the army since, I don't know, many years before I was even born, He joined the army when he was 14, and because of his knowledge in the army, he had to get back into the army again.
All right. And what was his role in World War II? What did he do during that time?
Well, before before the war started, my father was dropped in Germany to find out what was going on, and I was a year and 6 weeks old when he was called to the army again. So that was my mother left with 6 children to look after until the war ended.
And you said that he also went to North Africa?
He was in Tobruk in Africa, and also Kenya.
Very interesting. And what was his job in Africa? What was his task to do?
It was to get Rommel out of Tobruk, because that's where the German people were building their tanks, their bombs, and whatever they needed to fight in the war. And they'd been trying to get him out so many other times, and they decided they were going to get someone else to see if they could find out how they could get him out of there. And I think it was President Attlee that came in, and he, with his knowledge, wars and strategies and whatever, he was trained for war, Mm-hmm. And So they managed to get Rommel out, and my father actually got a chance to sit and talk to Rommel, and he said he was a wonderful man, but doing what he was told.
Yes,
You
he was
know,
on the other side.
on the other side. I mean, there's good and bad on every side.
Yeah, absolutely. So he returned to Scotland many years after the war ended. And what was he like after he returned from the war?
He was a very beaten man. He didn't seem to be able to associate with people after the war, because all he knew was fighting and doing what he was told to do. As I say, I was a year and 6 weeks old when they went to the war, and I was about 8 or 9, I think, when they came back. And it was a big shock to all of us. And there was many a times he would say, I wish I was back in the war. He says it was better than trying to raise 6 kids that he didn't even know. I
Yeah.
think it was, it was just,
So
but
do you think he had post-traumatic stress disorder?
very much, yeah.
Yeah.
He was a very beaten man.
And the last question I'd like to ask you, Granny, is what did celebrating Remembrance Day mean to Grandpa McCallum?
Oh, very much. There was a square in Glasgow called, I can't remember the name now, George's Square, George's Square, and where mostly all the people that were still alive after the war would go down there, and it was a beautiful ceremony, beautiful square, and they would have speakers there, and some people telling about their experiences. I never went to it myself. My father just seemed to want to go by himself. I guess it was to give him a chance to talk to some people that he did know. But it was hard for my father after the war. He was a beaten man, I would say. And
Absolutely.
he seemed to be better with his grandchildren because that was a side they never seen. I think, with him maybe being older or what, but he loved his grandchildren. He seemed to have,
All right. Thank you very much, Granny, for letting me interview you.
okay, you
All
take
right.
care, sweet.
See
Love
you
you.
later.
Bye-bye.
All right. So I found it very fascinating and just really interesting to be able to talk to my grandmother about my great grandfather's experiences. I wasn't aware that he had been into North Africa. I was aware that he had signed up underage illegally. He got recruited on the streets of Glasgow, and the recruiter said, go in here and pretend you're 17. Don't tell them you're actually 14. And that's how his career in the military started. And he stayed in the military for the rest of his life. So it was really, really nice to catch up with my grandmother and learn about these stories. So what I'd like to do for the end of this assembly is I would like us to listen to the last post. This is a military tradition. It signifies the day's activities have come to an end. You'll hear them at military funerals as well as important events, military events such as Remembrance Day. So what I'd like to do is listen to the last post. I'd like everyone to kind of think about and consider what Remembrance Day means to you, what it means to Britain, what it means to people all over the world, and how to think about, thanking those who have done so much and sacrificed so much for us so that we can have the rights and freedoms that we have today. And after we listen to the last post, I'm going to end this assembly. And if you could please just have a moment of silence in memoriam of those who fought in the war after this assembly ends, that would be much appreciated. All right, in a moment of silence, please.